Good evening, everyone. My name is Heather Grondin. I'm the Vice President of Communications and Stakeholder Relations with the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. I'm here along with representatives from Bridging North America, who are WDBA's private sector partner responsible to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the Gordie Howe International Bridge project. I would like to acknowledge that the lands that the Gordie Howe International Bridge is being constructed on sits on Anishinaabe territory. The Anishinaabe in the Windsor area are known as the Three Fire Confederacy, which consists of the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations. This land also serves as a place of refuge for the Huron-Wyandot people. Tonight, we'll be sharing information on the first of 3 art commissions that are part of the Gordie Howe International Bridge project. You'll hear directly from the artist that is currently undertaking the design of the commission. And finally, you'll be able to ask questions about the process and learn about how you can provide comments for the artist's consideration. I would ask that you hold your questions to the end of the presentation. Please note that we are recording tonight's meeting and we will be posting it to the project YouTube channel. We're doing this to allow people who are unable to attend tonight's meeting the opportunity to review and provide comments. Just as a quick housekeeping rule, we would ask that you keep your cameras off and your mics muted until we arrive at the questions section of the presentation. So moving on to our first slide, the overall project aesthetics have their roots in the Detroit River International Crossing study, which was undertaken in the early 2000s. This international environmental assessment included hundreds of public meetings in Canada and the US on a variety of topics. These included bridge location, environmental concerns, construction and operation mitigations, and aesthetics. Ultimately, the study identified the project goals to be the construction of an impressive and inspiring new gateway symbol for Canada and the US. The public consultation also led to the establishment of aesthetic themes that have been integrated into the overall project's look and feel, including concepts like historic, friendship, modern, and the use of native vegetation. Public art on the project again, came out of our Detroit River International Crossing study and the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act that was completed as part of that study. Based on years of public and stakeholder consultation, the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act conditions of approval identified a requirement for public art, including one specific piece to reflect Indigenous people. In response to this requirement, the project identified 3 public art components that would be integrated into the bridge and the Canadian port of entry. These include dramatic and dynamic bridge lighting at night, an artistic building facade at the Canadian port of entry, and a standalone Indigenous art commission to be completed by a Canadian Indigenous artist. Back in 2018, we undertook a call for artists, and each commission received numerous submissions. Artist selection will occur on each commission as the work on those commissions begin over the next few years. And all commissions will be completed and in place prior to the opening of the bridge. Today's meeting focuses on commission number 2, which is the building facade at the Canadian port of entry. And the artist selection for this commission has already taken place, which is the focus of today's meeting. Through our own public consultation, Windsor and Detroit, the project continues to prioritize opportunities to recognize the area's rich history. We are continuing to meet with community representatives on ways to incorporate historical and cultural recognition into the project through various efforts within and outside of the port of entry walls. For example, landscaping at the Canadian port of entry recognizes the influence of early Francophone settlers by integrating nods to ribbon farms and the plantings that will provide visual interest. An upcoming community benefit initiative will recognize Sandwich and Delray's history through a series of complementary interpretive signage that, when complete, will allow pedestrians and cyclists to enjoy an international walk through time linked by the Gordie Howe International Bridge. The project continues to meet with the community to integrate cultural and historical recognition features, such as recognition of the area's role in the Underground Railroad into the project. We'll start digging into the details of the current art submission. First, we're going to walk through the commission requirements and location, and then I'll introduce the artist, Sarah Graham, who will share her thoughts on the concept underway. Comments collected following the meeting over the next week will be shared with Sarah for her consideration as she works through the concept to final design. The final design will be publicly unveiled at a later date. So the requirements for the commission were as follows. A noted Canadian artist was to be engaged. The artist has an opportunity to provide a design that will be integrated into the facade of the building by manipulating the building's cladding system. The design will be achieved through inscribed imagery or bas relief using concrete form liners. The commission would reflect positive imagery, a sense of welcome, the use of color, and improve the facade of the energy center by integrating design panels into the exterior cladding. The Energy and Maintenance Complex at the Canadian Port of Entry is situated near the traffic route for vehicles accessing the Gordie Howe International Bridge headed to the US, and can also be seen in a limited view from traffic entering Canada. It is identified within the red circle in this aerial view of the Canadian Port of Entry. This image shows the building exterior, and if you see the dotted red line, that indicates the actual surface area that will integrate the design panels into the exterior cladding. So basically, this becomes the canvas for the art. While the exterior of the building is visible to passing traffic, pedestrian access is limited to Port of Entry staff. The building is also situated in a fenced area, a design feature the artist is considering in her overall concept. This image is an example of the use of conventional form liners, similar to what will be applied to the energy complex. Please note that this is not a picture of the energy complex, but is really meant to show what a form liner looks like and how aesthetic treatments can be applied by simply turning form liners around to create various horizontal or vertical patterns. It is anticipated that the design form liners will also reflect natural light and precipitation to further enhance the building regardless of day or night, rain or shine. Color will also be integrated into the concrete panels, and this is to add visual interest and texture through changes in lighting as the sun moves across the sky and also throughout the seasons. Last summer, an art jury interviewed 5 artists for this specific commission. Artists were from across Canada, including one from Windsor. Sarah Graham, the selected artist, hails from Southern Ontario and is currently based in Port Moody, British Columbia. She holds a BFA from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design and an MFA from the University of Guelph. She has exhibited her work across North America and has also undertaken several public art commissions, with the most recent one installed in Richmond, BC in 2020. It's my pleasure to introduce Sarah, who will share information on her previous work, her inspiration, and her initial thoughts for the concept. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you very much, Heather, and welcome everyone. Before I begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that I learn, live, and play on the unceded core territory of the Kwakwaka'wakw First Nation, which lies within the shared territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Kazi, Musqueam, Squamish, and Stolo nations. What I'm going to be presenting tonight is some examples of my artwork to help inform you of some of the directions that I am thinking about to create the final artwork. I will first begin with just defining what my art practice is. The body of work that I've been developing over the last 20 years has been primarily concerned with the issues and ideas that surround and make up the contemporary city. My current practice is predominantly rooted in drawing, and one of my central activities is the mapping of place through combinations and permutations of fact, fiction, histories, and physical spaces. I'm also curious about our relationship to place and space, and how it shifts and morphs depending on our individual movement and speed throughout the environment. I've divided my talk into two different strategies or sort of approaches that I'm thinking that I would like to incorporate into the final design. And so these artworks are just really to sort of illustrate some of those ideas. Next slide. So the first approach that I will be thinking about is mapping. Mapping has long been a central concern within my artistic practice. I am particularly interested in providing a new perspective on an existing landscape. I try to create a new narrative that connects the past and the present and reveals the systems and networks that lie above and beneath the surface of everyday life. This work that you're looking at right now is called Street Finder, and it was actually what began it all. The book that you see to the right is an altered map book that I had removed everything but the major road systems from the book, and what remained, as you can kind of see, is a complex abstract latticework of road networks that are layered on top of each other. The map itself and how to reorientate it was always something very much of interest to me. And when I had closed the book and sort of opened it up to the first page, that image just became quite compelling. And so eventually I did photograph the front page of when the book was open. So the images that you're seeing on the right are two of these books that have been opened up. So the first one is Street Finder Windsor, and the second one is London. Next. So I was invited to participate in a solo show in London, Ontario for the Museum of London. I was born in London, but I did not grow up there. And I was very intrigued with the idea of creating artwork from a place that I have a connection with, but have never lived there. And the show was entitled The London Series, and used cartography as a starting point to develop all of the work that was in the exhibition. What you're looking at right now is two location maps, which were from a series of 6 works that were inspired by a historical insurance fire map of downtown London. At the time, cartographers, because computers didn't exist, instead of having to draw a new map with each new configuration or change of a building block or even a building, what they would do is that they would paste additional pieces of paper onto top of the map and then draw in the new configurations. And what I noticed with insurance fire maps is that if you look at the historical ones, they have a lifespan. They're usually given a certain period of time, anywhere between 30 to 50 years. And I really became really intrigued with that idea of a map having a living map, and a map having a lifespan, and how the map itself incorporates an ongoing archive of how the city is evolving and changing and being built, and that all of these layers are being added on top of the original map. So this artwork that you're looking at was me incorporating both the past and the present of downtown London. And what I really wanted to emphasize was just layering of the archive, and so I had the images screen printed on plexiglass so that when they were lit with the light, that you could see the reflection of the plexi. So the map itself is layered on top of itself. And that was just something that I was really interested in and really trying to document the archive. Next image. So this image here is from, it's a maquette from a short list that I was selected, but I did not get the commission. But I just thought, again, it sort of really illustrated some of my interest in mapping. This was for a residential building located in the Village in Toronto. And one of my objectives for this artwork was for the viewer, and whether it was a pedestrian who was walking in front of the sculpture, or it was a resident who would be walking by it to enter into the building, would be able to see themselves reflected back into their community. And this structure was sort of a lattice work of a map, and inside were highly reflective mirrored stainless steel, so that you would be able to see your reflection within the sculpture if you looked inside. To conceive of this artwork, I used a Google map of the village as the matrix to create the design. The short side was a single version of the map, while the two longer sides were combinations of a single map repeated and overlaid onto itself. I was particularly interested in shadow play, especially there had been talk about a water feature, and so to have colored shadows that would sort of shift over the water was something that I was quite intrigued by. And as I mentioned, there were 9 mirrored stainless steel columns that were placed inside, that were staggered, so that as you passed it, your reflection would sort of flicker and move. And not only would you sort of encounter yourself, you would see your surroundings behind you, as well as the color from the glasswork that would be included. Next slide. This artwork, which you do see behind me, is my most recent public art installation entitled Richmond Platts, and it was installed in November of 2020. After hearing the story from the developer of the site, I became very compelled by the story. This particular location where the new development was going to be taking place, there was a grouping of houses that were built by a resident who had passed away. He had immigrated to Canada in the 1930s. And he built not only his home that was on the site, but he also built numerous houses that surrounded. And I think that a lot of the local residents were upset that the fact that these houses, and not so much the houses, but the acknowledgement, the legacy that this community member had created would be forgotten. So the developer had decided that in the community utility kind of communal room, that there would be a placard that would acknowledge this gentleman and his legacy. And that was just something that really stuck with me. And so to conceive, so this artwork that you're looking at is 2 triangular columns that represented the shifting landscape and history of Richmond by providing viewers with both a historical and a contemporary property map of Richmond, BC. So in the photograph that's on the left, you see one of the columns that's further back and then one that's closer. So the one that's further back is the historical map, and the one that is closer is the contemporary map. And as you enter the columns, you're greeted with these two images that you see on the right. So one is the historical map, and then the current map, and that sort of longer, darker rectangular bar is where the current development is. I really wanted to highlight that place holds history and legacies, and hopefully that these works encourage the public to look beneath the surface of the maps and consider the region's history. Next image. So the next strategy that I'd like to highlight is just my use of drawing and line. Line really is integral to my practice. I describe my practice as being based in drawing, and I consider most of my artwork drawings, whether they're 2- or 3-dimensional. Line as a form is extremely important in conceiving all of my artwork. And I'm really now just going to be showing you just a couple of projects that really explore line. So this artwork was also part of the Museum London exhibition. When I had started to do just some initial research of London and the landscape, and I really saw that there was a lot of bridges, and I immediately thought that I would love to do a London Bridge series. And so I created 3 bridges for the for the exhibition. This particular bridge is Meadow Lily, which is a railway bridge. One of the things that I did notice with a lot of the bridges was that they did span over water, not necessarily roadways. And I really, I was just intrigued by some of these bridges and what sort of the water that they spanned over. And so I would get out of my car, and if I could, I would walk along the bridge and look over the bridge. And what I really started to connect with and become really quite fascinated with was the idea that when I looked over and I saw me being reflected in the water with the bridge behind me, so that I was much more a part of the bridge landscape. And I also noticed too that the reflection with the bridge created a complete shape. And so what you're looking at right here is the bridge with its reflection in the water. I also wanted to highlight, just with this piece too, that bridges have been a reoccurring element in my artwork. I really am interested in how I perceive and the metaphor of a bridge. Even though a bridge connects 2 areas, it is a physical structure that really is suspended in space, and by many it's considered, because of its suspension, in a non-place. And I really like to think of that non-place, that moment that you're traveling on the bridge in this non-place, as a portal, a place of time travel to another destination. And I think that this sort of metaphor does fit really nicely with the Gordie Howe Bridge as well. Next slide. So this project was another project that I was shortlisted for a residential development in North Vancouver. This project was located close to the waterway, and through my research of location and the connection to shipbuilding in North Vancouver, I created 2 artworks that responded to the surrounding location and the history. This was a very awkward corridor, a very tight corridor, and the developer had requested that they really wanted a design that would encourage meandering across the plaza, so that it was inviting to the public and not just the residents. And so the two artworks that I conceived was one which was Reflector. And Reflector is the light work that you do see based on the right, the two image. And Reflector casts a look back at North Vancouver's rich history along Burnett Inlet. Reflector draws on the North Shore's industrial heritage of shipbuilding and the physical infrastructure of the bridges that connect the city to the Lower Mainland. Passageway, the brickwork design in the plaza, is inspired by the International Marine Organization Standard Navigation Lights Diagram. That's a mouthful. That illustrate the position of lights on ships and boats at night. It is a universal communication system that identifies a ship's intentions to other ships while at sea and is shared from ship to shore and shore to ship. The brickwork pattern was inspired by these diagrams. I chose patterns that signaled either safe passage or slow speed into the design as a cryptic way of encouraging passageway throughout the plaza. Metaphorically, I see Reflector as the beacon that signals the location to the public, and passageway is the bridge that connects residents to their neighbors as they move through the plaza. Next slide. Rebuilding Canada is a series of collages that uses some techniques from paper toll, a popular 1980s craft that transforms multiple copies of two-dimensional images into three-dimensional forms resembling a three-dimensional relief. It's a little bit harder to see in these photographs, but a lot of the different layers that you're seeing are actually, they're raised so that you really do get a sense of depth in these works. These works are partially influenced by an international artistic group that began in the 1950s known as the Sélectionnez International. These works are based on one of their strategies they employ to explore a city. They coined the term psychogeography, which is defined as a playful and inventive way of navigating the urban environment in order to examine its architecture and spaces. The works break down a city into a more enjoyable parts. The work that's on the left, the Thornton Rail Yard, I was asked to participate in a show at the Surrey Art Gallery that looked at an aspect of Surrey or something that I was inspired by. And living on the other side of the Fraser River, I always see Surrey, but I do see the rail yard. The rail yard is right up along the river. And it was, I've always been drawn to sort of industrial areas, and I was very compelled to see what was on the other side. So these two works really depict or sort of illustrate my feelings of and my experiences that I had while going through the rail yards. And while they're not direct representations, that they really, for me, illustrate how I saw them and what parts of the rail yards that I really enjoyed. Next slide. And then finally, I wanted to include this last series that was also just completed last year. This series of photographs is entitled Generator. It's inspired by an architectural project by British architect Cedric Price entitled Generator, 1976 to 1980. While Price's project was never realized, he conceived of it as a place to work, create, think, and stare in Yulee, Florida. The photographs in Generator are speculative and playful in nature. They do not propose a new formation of the urban landscape, but rather they are exploratory and consider the unlimited possibilities of urban design and its infrastructure in order to generate a dialogue about the contemporary city where the form is modular and flexible. One of the things that I'm always been really interested in is the infrastructure of a building. If a building is being built, I'm always intrigued to imagine what it might look like before seeing with all of the cladding on. And sometimes for me, the most interesting aspects of a building is this sort of framework. And so that's what these works sort of reference, that if you're trying to think about how these buildings or structures might look like once they have all of their cladding and walls built. These structures were built by hand out of plastic model train infrastructure and model making styrene rods. They were then painted and then photographed on colorful backgrounds. I wanted to include these because they illustrate my interest in integrating diverse and maybe incongruent forms and textures to create a structure or pattern. I feel that interesting textures really will be important for the final design of the artwork on the facade, because it will help provide interesting shadow play and captivate the eyes of passengers as they drive by. So that is the end of my presentation. I really would like to mention that I am incredibly honored to be the chosen artist for this project. As I've learned more about the scope and scale of this project, I've become even more excited and I feel ready to take it on. Thanks.
So before we open the floor to questions, I am going to walk you through how to share comments that you may have following tonight's meeting. At the time of registration, you should have received a comment card by email. Please complete that comment card and return it by email to info@wdbridge.com. You can also download the comment card from GordieHoweInternationalBridge.com. Comments will be accepted from tonight through to midnight on March 16th, 2021, and we will then share all the comments received with Sarah for her consideration. While we welcome all comments, I do want to note that only those received from Canadian citizens will be considered, and this is due to the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act requirements identified through and during the Detroit River International Crossing Study. Finally, the final art concept, as I had noted earlier, will be shared publicly at a later date. There will not be another consultation on this specific commission, so please do ensure to submit your comments before March 16th if that is of interest to you. I'm now happy to take some questions. Please raise your hand if you have a question. The raise hand icon can be found at the top of the screen and looks like a hand. And I'm just going to stop sharing and I will turn my camera on. All right, I think we have our first question. David Hanna, I believe, DHan96.
Hi there. Yeah, I was wondering, in the original competition, the three-part site part competition, excuse me, a second, I recall that there was something to do with the Carolinian forest imagery and fritted glass. Has that been dissipated from that aspect, or is it still potentially part of it?
So the location has changed from the fritted glass to now the energy, the wall of the energy complex building. And that was changed for a number of reasons, mostly primarily to, as we've advanced some of the design concepts related to the buildings, that the need to move the artwork from the one building to this building has occurred. And then in terms of that design concept, the Carolinian design, that is potentially still on the table for consideration by Sarah. Do you have a follow-up question to that, David?
Well, there was reference to the panels on the building. So, would I be correct in assuming that the artist would have to be working with the panel manufacturer, or is it going to be something applied to the panels?
It would likely be part of the manufacturing process, and that will be something that ultimately Bridging North America works directly with the manufacturer on.
I see.
I can speak a little bit further to that technology with the form liner, and so the panels are going to be I think the easiest way to maybe describe it is it's going to be a large mold, and that's the form liner, so that the concrete is then poured into the mold, and then it's popped out and dried and then applied to the exterior. So the panels themselves will incorporate the relief design. It's built like it's right into the panel, like it's part of it. And so that these panels then will be installed on the facade.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Any other questions? Again, I just encourage you to use the raise hand function if you have a question or a comment that you would like to share. Randy?
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Heather. My concern, I guess, is with the location being where it is. And Heather, I think I'm getting this correct. It's going to be once you've cleared customs and you're at the leaving part anyway. You wouldn't be customs. I'm sorry. I meant once you've gone through the tolls or whatever it will be, then you'll be approaching this building, which will be on our right-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be correct?
Yep.
And it's sort of a, I wouldn't call it it's got three sides and whatever. Will it be the same roof line as well, or will it be higher at a part of a roof line, or?
From an eyesight perspective, like from an eye line perspective?
Yes.
So I'm not sure how high the building is, but it certainly is of a magnitude or a height that it's going to be a significantly high building, and it will be able to be very well seen by outbound going traffic, so traffic going out from Canada to the US. One of our requirements with the location for the art, and this was in working with Bridging North America, was that it needed to be at a location that was going to be highly visible. It couldn't be it could not be in a position that did not at least provide clear visibility from either inbound or outbound going traffic. So if your concern is around people's ability to see and reflect upon the artwork, I believe that is addressed by the location of it.
If I might just quickly just add to that, the building height is approximately 7 meters tall, if that helps.
Yes, that's good. I appreciate that, and that's how tall it will be. How large will the panels themselves be? Do you have a sense of that?
So that's still something that's being discussed, but with one of the precaster consultants, the idea was approximately each panel would be, we're looking at around 3 meters wide, with being 7 meters high. And the overall wall dimension is approximately 63 meters long.
So divided by 3, so it'd probably be 21 each, do you think?
Yeah, it's slightly more than 21, so it's like 22. Okay. That's kind of what I'm in, like what I've been working with the idea of about 22 panels.
And the reason I ask all these silly questions about size and whatever and location, was that it would occur to me that as people are getting through the toll booths and then they're going by this, I would really like the art to be able to be seen and appreciated. And yet I feel in the location, people are just going to be whizzing by. They've got their change or tokens or whatever we're going to be using. It'll be the new form of currency to get across the bridge. And if it's linear, if your designs have shown a lot of kind of a linear nature to them, I worry that people are going to scoot by it so quickly and not be able to really dwell upon the concepts, and there won't be a pamphlet or a brochure to go with them out of the toll, and I worry about that. I think that in the early days of talking about the Gordie Howe Bridge, one of the things that we had talked about was that this is going to be the joining of two cities, of two cultures, and yet we have always been linked historically. The river used to be the indigenous people would live on both sides of the Detroit River, virtually where we are, and down near the Ambassador Bridge, the villages and that sort of a thing. And so that the river and the crossing of the river throughout Windsor's history has always been one of how has history changed or brought us across that divide. And so if it's linear, and if the lines are close and whatever, I'm afraid people aren't going to grasp like the map that you had talked about, or some of the three-dimensional kind of art, lovely, beautiful pieces of work. But I'm thinking of this spot and wanting people to, again, this is a leaving point where the people will be driving over, or driving past rather. They'll be leaving Canada. They'll be leaving our community. A very different message than if it was on the other side of the plaza, where they'd be coming and they'd be waiting at customs for goodness knows how long, and they'd have a chance to kind of dwell on it. So I say with all goodness, I worry that something that has been contemplated so well by you and so deeply by you will just not even leave a reflection. It won't even leave the people who are passing it with any sense of contemplation or appreciation, or knowing where you have left and where you are going, and the bridge thing, the one in London, and how you're even going across it. And the other thing is that this bridge is going to last about 120 years minimum. So they're going to be seeing this piece of art for a long time. It will live beyond our lifetimes. So this once in a generation bridge, and sort of where we come from as the people of Windsor, of being an early, the earliest settlers, being the native people, the indigenous people, and then the settlers coming in who are sharing it with them, and then now have kind of overtaken it. I'm just hoping that your art will pick that up in such a way that it can be quickly observed. Oh, and that was the other thing, was, isn't there going to be a fence or something that Heather talked about? Won't there be kind of some sort of a fencing along the bottom that I imagine will be consistent with the panels? How will you, or I guess that'd be fun for you, because you could do different things with the fencing and the background, probably made of the same materials. Would I be correct on that?
I can't speak completely to the fence, but it is a security fence, and so there are very certain parameters and requirements, security, that I have no control over, and how it's presented.
So Randy, we can expect that the fence would be more what you might see as one of the, I don't know if it's one of those wire fences, but that you'd be able to see through. So part of Sarah's considerations will be thinking about the fact that there is this fence in front of the building, but that it is definitely possible to see through that fence to understand the design that will be placed on the wall work.
Oh, so maybe plexiglass, or maybe bulletproof glass or something could achieve the same sort of a thing at a higher height. Anyway, I've talked to them. I apologize for that. I'll certainly write my comments. Thanks.
Okay, no, we appreciate that and appreciate all your feedback, and definitely take note of your comments regarding the visibility and ensuring that people have the opportunity to experience the art as they're traveling. I think that's a really key and important part of the information that you shared.
And I just want to echo Heather's comments. Thank you so much for your insight. I think that those are really great observations and concerns.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Christopher Brown.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Heather and Sarah, for taking my question. My question is technical in nature. I'm an urban planner, member of the OPPI, and a member of the OALA, Ontario Association of Landscape Architects. And so my question is kind of related to the last one, really, is I'm familiar with bas-relief, concrete form liners, and my experience most recently in Ottawa, the Holocaust Memorial near downtown, I find that they're very subtle. The Holocaust Memorial works because you can walk into it, but in this case you indicated the staff will be on foot, but the public will be driving past in a car. So my question to Sarah is, what sort of strategies will you deploy to make this something that's A, quickly noticed by the public as art, and B, they'll be able to appreciate it, whether that's through materials or color or lighting, or what sort of strategies do you want to employ?
Well, these are exactly the questions that right now that I'm currently considering for this design. I'm very familiar that this the primary viewing is going to be probably at a car speed of about 50 kilometers on the one side. There might be a little bit of slower observation when you are on the other side, the queue returning back into Canada or arriving to Canada. I think that some of my interests and some of my strategies is that to really utilize shadow play and how the sun and the change and the shift of the day will sort of cast shadows from some of the elements that I might be incorporating. And I'm also really considering color, and I'm using color as a way to hopefully draw the viewer in from a distance, so that they're maybe captivated, that once they do approach closer, that that they're able to have this this wonderful experience of seeing some imagery as well. So I think that scale is definitely a factor. I think that shadow and the use of the form lighter's capabilities of creating this low relief sculpture that will really utilize or play with off of the shadow. And I am really interested in using color as a way of sort of capturing that initial that initial response.
Thank you, Christopher. Any follow-up questions to that response?
Well, thank you. Actually, I really appreciated that, and I certainly encourage you and the team you're working with to do your utmost with those strategies, because I think form liners, I think there are some drawbacks, certainly. I mean, they're very inexpensive. It's easy to do. Technically, There's even an example in Windsor. If you look at the Howard Avenue, I'm not in Windsor, but I know there's an example under the Howard Avenue underpass, and so there are strategies. I wouldn't call that art, by the way, but certainly it's decorative, right? They used form liners, but also paint. And my worry is that this could either be really a success or it could be a failure, depending on whether the public can really, notice that it's artwork. Because I find the form liner, I find the bas relief is too subtle, it's too shallow, and can be, it can be mistaken for an architectural treatment. So, so I encourage you and your team to really grapple that. I'm glad to hear about the use of color. Hopefully, your budget will permit that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any more questions out there? David, do you have another question? I see your hands up. I'm just not sure if that was from before or if you have another question.
No, I did have another question.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if you could elaborate more precisely on what the energy building is, but let me get to the other part of the question as well too. The other three, well, like there's 3 art commissions altogether. And is there any communication between the, and I realize they're vastly different, of course, like the lighting and so forth, but is there any communication or thematic linkage between the 3 artists, or indeed the other 2 artists actually even chosen yet? The other aspect of, as she explained, Sarah explained, like there'll be, cars going to the States, seeing one side, and people coming back to Canada, seeing the other side. Particularly people coming back to Canada, seeing our side, particularly Americans, it would, it's the most important side to generate interest in, possibly even more local interest in staying in Windsor and seeing things in Sandwich and so forth. And I'm not suggesting, tourist signs or anything. I'm suggesting some sort of thematic local linkage that can, she alluded to that in some of her other work with the maps, although it's very abstract, but something that could be, link right to Sandwich in that sense. And following up a little bit on what the landscape architect asked, or maybe didn't ask, was the aspect of living art, of landscape, architecture, art. Like, is there any way that can be incorporated in the wall too? That changes with the seasons. It can even change material over time if something wasn't successful due to conditions or whatever.
Right. So a few points on that. So in terms of the other 2 art commissions, the standalone Indigenous art piece and the aesthetic bridge lighting, those artists have not been selected yet. We will be going through the artist selection. Well, we did go out and do the call for artists, all 3 commissions at the same time. We haven't selected those artists yet. We will be doing that closer to when Bridging North America is advancing the more specific work on those commissions over the next couple of years. In terms of some of those ideas and concepts you put forward, I think those are all great notes. And David, please put those down on the comment card and send that in. And we'll give that to Sarah for her consideration. And regarding the building itself, so its purpose is to support the overall operations of the port of entry. It's not one that's open to the public or one where we do secondary inspections or nexus cards. It's more focused on the operations. So it's operations focused as opposed to one where the public would go into.
I was curious about the term energy building, how that plays into it. And the other question, if I may, is the aspect of where bicyclists and pedestrians will be going through their own customs building, if you want. And is there anything planned for that in an artistic sense? Because surely they'll have more time to, to notice things and to look at things and to stop and, spend some time there than a motorist whizzing by.
Sure, and that's something regarding the area for the pedestrians and cyclists access point. That's something that we're working on kind of separately, looking at how we might be integrating some of the concepts that we're presenting related and some of the initiatives related to community benefits and doing some look at that access point a little bit separately.
And where did the term energy building come? Why is it called the energy building if it's not, you said operational, but I'm just trying to figure out what it is exactly. I mean, that is part of operations. So things like HVAC. Oh, okay. So it is energy then, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any aspect of, displaying that in itself as being any sort of innovation in the energy systems that could be, shown themselves?
I mean, that's
whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Dave. That might be something we'd have to look at from a technical perspective. I did want to go. I see we have one more question. We're at 7:30, but Kenneth, I'll go to you, and you can be our last question for the evening.
Oh, I think he's on mute.
There, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Going back to Randall's concerns for a few moments, I wonder if it is possible, or has there been either a sightline diagram or a vision sightline diagram, either in 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions, that give us some sense of how the fence in front of the building impacts the viewing angle? Because I'm concerned about the lack of visibility of this, what I hope will be a wonderful artwork.
So I'm
There should be some kind of a sightline diagram, a very simple 3-dimensional or 2-dimensional sightline diagram. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Sarah, if that's something that you and Bridging North America have worked on developing a 2-dimensional diagram, or if that's even something that you normally do in your type of artwork. Maybe you can speak to that.
For something like this, a sight line diagram is vital.
Sarah, any thoughts on that?
So there was a short, I guess for me, but I guess it was more just for informative for me, a video, a time-lapse sort of video that was made so that I could understand that, because I obviously it's not built and I needed to, sort of comprehend. So but I don't know if that's where that is at all in, as a sightline, as like a 2-dimensional, image. So I'm really unable to answer that, but I personally, for myself, have understood sort of where this is, and traveling kind of at the distance and at the speed of seeing the building, so to understand how fast a vehicle might be and where they sort of the eye level of a passenger in a vehicle.
Well, a simple architectural model would also suffice to give the artist a good feeling for what can be seen at what distance and at what speed as well. So, okay, thank you. Thank you.
And Kent, we have produced our Bridging North America has produced some scale models of the area that we can work from.
Good.
Great. Okay, so that's our time for this evening. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight and for asking such great questions and providing some really good comments for us to start thinking about. As a reminder, please fill out the comment card that was emailed to you, or if you don't have it, or if you want to share a comment card with other people, that is available on our website, GordieHoweInternationalBridge.com. Our deadline, once again, to receive comments is by midnight on March 16th. And we're receiving those comments via email at info@wdbridge.com. Once again, we will be posting tonight's video on our YouTube channel. So if you're aware of any other people who you think would benefit from having heard this presentation or seeing this information, please send them a link to the video. You can also direct them to us, again, at info@wdbridge.com, and we're happy to answer people's questions or have further dialogue with them on this really important topic. And Sarah, thank you for joining us tonight. We're looking so much forward to working with you and working on this art piece. And as Randy said, it's going to be a piece of art that's going to be in place for 100+ years. So we're really looking forward to working with you and seeing the outcome of your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight.